plan, if he had the plan, how can he, if we're talking about a clean sweep, CEO, new director of football, new chief scout, new manager,
but Ange is a disaster. So let Wells and Mason run it. Bring someone in.
Now that one I can go with. He should have dropped Ange and just said 3 months ago, Christmas or whatever, and then just said, you know what, Mason, the season's screwed, mate. Just do what you can with it. And I don't really think he'd have got any stick off the fans either. Yeah, but there was still the problem is, think of it from another side. Yeah, take that Levy hate hat. Take that Levy hate hat off for a minute. Yeah, I don't like the prick either. Yeah. But you even keep telling me he's a poor businessman. Yeah, looks it as well, doesn't he? And I just think he's seen this a mile off coming, and I think he's just stepped back basically and said, okay, fans, there's what you want. I think he's got his plan because he already saw this season was dead 6 months ago, like a lot of people did. Yes, he should have got rid of Ange there and then whatever else. But if he has got a plan for the end of the season, then isn't it all better to clear it out in one go and get everything you want in one go than having to do it in drips and drabs as such? Now, if he could have got a better manager in there and then, if he could have got a better manager there and then, but coming up to, say, Christmas, who could we have gone for Frank? Could we have gone for any of the others?
Also, how much is that cash flow going to cost you? Right? Say this all the time. Cash flow, I know people in your audience hate me talking about money, but at the end of the day, it is a factor here. If the chairman's thinking about that stuff, you got to pay off what, £7.5 million in compensation to Ange Postecoglou. You're going to have to pay
10, I think, Sean, but it would have been 12 or 12.5 then. So it's only 2.5 million, and by keeping him, he's cost nearly 30 million.
Hang on. Well, you don't know that for a start.
Hang on. League position. Hang on. League position. Each league position is 3.1 million.
Yeah.
So if you get rid of him at Christmas or you get rid of him at the end of the season, it's 2.5 million. So that's one league position. Are you telling me that the disaster that we've seen with Ange, we would be one league place above?
Okay. Well, let me just make the point I was going to make. Right. So you're not just paying off the 2.5 million. You've still got the rest of his contract to pay off as well.
No, I'm just saying. No, you're paying him 12.5 instead of 10.
Yeah. Just let me get my point. You've also got to get rid of the rest of the potential clear out, of which we are now thinking is going to be part of the thing that's happening at the end of the season. So other people that might be on compensation packages as well don't know what that looks like. Yep. Then you're going to have to pay compensation to the club in which you're buying the manager from. And the only manager that we're talking about that's out of office right now is Xavi, however you say his name, and that
the ex-Dortmund one, or the one from Dortmund,
or Terzic, right? Terzic.
That's the one. Also Gareth Southgate.
Or Gareth Southgate. And all that stuff, if you're going to go and try and get Thomas Frank, if you're going to go and try and get an Iriola, all those things, not that you would necessarily have those things. And we all spoke about it at the time. The market was dry. Most of the media you'd think that the sort of senior media who you'd think would have closer tabs on what's the reality of the situation is saying that there was nowhere to really go for the managerial market. It wouldn't cost you an extra X amount of money in compensation. Then you've got to pay that guy a lot of money. And you're finding out now, I don't personally buy it from there's no money to spend, you've got to sell to buy bullshit. No. I think that whole thing's
bullshit.
Right? We bid £70 million on deadline day after.
But you're not going to sit there and say you've got 500 million to spend everybody, are you? That's just common sense, Sean, isn't it?
100%. You want to keep your cards. You'd hope that Daniel Levy would be smart to keep his cards close to his chest on that regard. But
exactly.
So I'm just saying that from a the idea of cash flow is certainly real, and that Tottenham are there may be some element of truth to the idea of the narrative that the £30 million that's being cost. And like to Lubo, to your point, like I hear what you're saying in terms of it all comes out in the wash. Only in a world where the Premier League position is dramatically different, and that is a supposition that we don't know whether that would have necessarily worked out or not. Look at, for example, Ruben Amorim. Right, they sacked Ten Haag. Even if they kept Ten Haag, would Manchester United have finished 16th? Past 15th, 14th? Would they have finished 10th? We don't know. But Ruben Amorim coming in mid-season hasn't exactly transformed their league performance, has it?
I think he's got the problem with United is they've got a very good manager and the squad's not up to it. So I think whatever manager comes in, you give Amorim 2 years, I think you see United challenging at the top. If they back him and they allow him to bring his players in, then I think United is a different animal.
if you had 2 cars or more on finance between 2015 and 2021.
His players in, then I think United is a different
But
animal.
Ian,
But they're broke as
that's
well,
not
right?
what I think, Sean. That's not what I think Sean's saying. If I understood you right, Sean, you're saying basically they got in a good manager and paid the excess money for it as well because it's middle of the season and that, and it's basically done absolutely jack shit for their season except get us on.
Sorry, let me finish.
That I totally agree with. So
Yeah,
that's why I said just get rid of him and get in Southgate for 3 months.
could have
And
done
then
that.
go for the proper one.
Bringing someone on a short term, just fix.
Or even if it was Mason, that is the bit I agree with.
But look
But
at
I
Jim
think he's
Ratcliffe,
seen
right?
this
Jim
a mile
Ratcliffe.
off.
So Jim Ratcliffe has come in, and within a few months, he's decided to say we were going to have to turn off the lights at December unless we did this, that, and the other. Which obviously everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" Right? You've got owners that are not you, but the other owners that have taken £1 billion in dividends out. If they wanted to put more money back in, they could. So let's not pretend like United are broke. And they're the biggest cash cow in all of football because of their historical brand. But that being said, they did have to pay those compensations. And you guys were just saying that Manchester United will be back if he gets the money. We talk about Tottenham's sliding doors moment, that everything hinges on us lifting the trophy. If there's one club that needs that Champions League money more than Tottenham do, that can't weather the storm like we can, bearing in mind, right, like last season, we only had a 4% revenue drop from the season before. Last season, fewest games we've ever played in the Premier League era. Season before in the Champions League, right? So that's like that kind of like from sort of feast to famine, if you like, over the last 2 seasons. And it was only manifested into a 4% revenue, which is why I don't buy the bullshit that we don't have the money to spend in the summer. I don't buy it. And if that is the narrative of the summer, then I will absolutely go after the owners, absolutely criticize where I think necessary, like I always try to do. But I just think that this notion that, sorry, so last thing, this notion that it's as simple as the way you presented it to us just then, Luba, I just don't necessarily think it's quite the way that you say it is.
Can we? The thing is, as well, I think when the Man United point is a very interesting one because we're potentially 2 games away from being in the exact same position that the Man United board was last year, which is a manager that has massively underperformed, then goes and wins a trophy and almost made the decision, right, that, all right, we'll keep him. They then went and spent, I don't know, Man, you spent the best part of 230 million. I don't know the exact number, but I know it was a lot of money last summer.
200 million on 3 players, so.
Right. Now imagine they had got rid of Ten Haag at that time, had Amorim, and Amorim had used that money to get in players for his system. I think Man U regret that massive. They will massively regret that the guy they kept in because he won a trophy, like what Danny was saying, it was more sentiment rather than let's do what's right for the club. Tottenham have to be very careful because this man, I think, will win the Europa League. But when he does, if we're going to be sentimental and saying, oh, that covers over everything now, apparently now that's going to mean he knows how to coach in the league. It means he's going to manage properly. He's going to suddenly start developing players. If that's what we want to do, just remember that manager is going to have our transfer budget. And if he starts the season poorly, you're now in a position like Man U were when a manager comes in at the beginning of a season.
Wants his own recycling the same old thing.
Wants 4 or 5 of his own players. Maybe he doesn't play the same formation. So Spurs have to be very careful and learn from what Man United did. And I don't think when fans say to me, you can't sack a manager that wins us this trophy. I can. That's how I look at it. I look at it clinically that yes, you can. Thank you for winning the trophy.
Yeah, there's empirical evidence to suggest that living on a meritocracy basis and like good vibes is going to come back to bite you. Can I ask you a question though? Right, so I subscribe to what you guys are saying on that one. Just sorry, Dan. Let me pop this question out, and then you can answer. Go where you want to. But the question I want to ask you, all 3 of you, was: in a world where he does win the cup, even though I think we were on the same page, you'd like to see him moved on anyway. Is there any unknown variable or value in the notion that his confidence, his demeanor changes when he wins, right? And on top of that, that there's some new indelible mark in the confidence of some of these young guys that at the age of like 19 years old, 20 years old, that they are a Europa League winner, and that creates some sort of like energy behind like wind in the sails of the football club that can do more next season than we saw this season.
No.
I think I think he stayed because Munn's had his back, and I think Munn will go. he was Munn's choice. So Munn's credibility is on the line with Levy, because the biggest job that Munn's got is bringing the right manager in. And through pure laziness or not having the network that Munn should have, he's gone for a fellow Aussie that he knows. Nice and easy, and brought him in instead of actually scouring around. They spoke to Nagelsmann. Nagelsmann wanted his own team in. I read Levy wouldn't have that. Slot, who knows whether it was Slot using Spurs to get a better deal with Feyenoord or not, but we ended up, unfortunately, with Ange. Munn has brought Ange in. He's had to stick by his man because that's his choice. And I think if Vinny comes in, if Paratici comes in, I think Munn's gone, and I think Ange has gone, regardless of whether he wins the Europa or not. And I think,
so he should be, because he is a terrible manager. I think I still stick to what I say. I think he's the worst manager I have ever seen in the Premier League.
Ever.
Yeah, you can see he's not capable for it. He's just not his strength. We're all good at certain things. We're all not good at certain things. Premier League is out of his depth. Yeah, and he's got to go. If people want to be sentimental about it, it's another thing though. You can go back on saying, even though it was only Ange, he still gave the Spurs supporters what they screamed for, and that was an attacking manager, or well, supposedly.
Is it attacking?
That's what a lot of Spurs supporters still seem to say.
Kamikaze.
That's why I agree, yeah. But we wanted attacking football. We didn't. People were going on, I can't handle Conte anymore. Even while we've been talking about this, people down the chat say, I don't want Thomas Frank. He's too slow. He's too defensive. He's too this. A majority was screaming for an attacking manager. There you go. Just done the treble up
we
there.
haven't seen it though, have we? Like, we saw it for a while, Dan, and then it was like, as soon as the facade fell apart against Chelsea last season, ever since then, it's been like the appearance of an attacking formation.
I agree.
In reality, it's just been, it hasn't looked like that.
So why do so many people
change their mind like a wind change direction?
So why many people stick by him then, still saying, I want this attacking manager who plays more Spurs football than I would rather have Conte?
Do you know what?
Conte doesn't play Spurs football.
What percentage of fans do you reckon, guys, are still Ange in?
I'd say there's still a high majority out there from what I see on Facebook and some of the shit stirring us.
I think it's
majority. I'd say there's a lot. I think it's 60-40 on Ange out.
In favour.
How many of them would be Ange out if it wasn't for this nice cup run we've had? And it has been nice. But I know people don't want the truth, but it has been a nice run. If this cup run didn't exist, let's just say AZ Alkmaar had knocked us out, right? How many of those would have changed? Because we're pinning everything on this Europa Cup. But to answer your question, Sean, I think the difficulty you've got is, does that change spark something in Ange? And I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he's got good tactics. I don't think he knows how to develop players. And I don't think that changes because we've beaten Man United in a cup final. You know, I could understand it if we played poorly every now and then. I could understand it if we'd lost 10 games this season. We're sitting here with 19 defeats. And for ages, we heard it was the injury excuse. We've won one league game in 9. One league game in 9. These numbers can't be allowed to be papered over because we've won a trophy. Well, listen, on paper, it's a big trophy. But realistically, if you actually look at the quality of it, if you look at the fact that teams don't drop down, if you actually look at the fact, like Lubo said, you're going to have the team sitting in 15th and 16th in the Premier League playing in a Europa League final.
How many of the teams above, just out of curiosity, again, play devil's advocate, and I know you're trying to wrap it up and have it for an hour.